Hi there, I'm here today to explain to you why damage range is a bad indicator, which other indicators in the game are a good measure for strength for your character, how to tell what you need to be upgrading next, and which content in the game is suited for your personal level of funding. Let's get into it. So as we all know, damage range used to be a great indicator for how strong you are in your character, but over the last years, many years now, many sources of damage have been added that don't get accounted for in the damage range. Therefore, I'll help you by showing which numbers better determine whether your character is strong or not, and which content in the game you can participate in at your level of funding. So how strong is your character really? As you can see here in this grid, this is a great way to map your progress through the game. First things first, this is my personal interpretation of the stages of the game. Many people only go through 3 stages, early, mid, and late. When I talk about anything, reboot, early, mid, late, endgame, whenever I mention any of these, this is what I'm referring to, and all the other sources I have in the game are very heavily interconnected with this buildup of the stages that I see in the game. These are based on feedback I get from players, typical hotspots where people tend to get stuck in the game, and general lines of the sand that you can draw between certain content and its accessibility, which we'll get into in a little bit. So the main indicator I use for the stage that you're in is your level, and these stages require certain scores in all of these metrics. Upcoming patches can affect where these limits are, and if necessary, the information here will be adjusted under my progression command on Twitch. So if there are any major patches, always keep an eye on this and make sure that it hasn't changed since this video has been uploaded. As you can see, the main stat is used as a general indicator rather than range these days, but even that one is imperfect since there are many sources that give you main stat. Therefore, the lower you are in stat, the bigger the variance in overall strength that can be associated with a certain amount of stat. Critical rate, critical damage, damage percentage, and IED percentage are very important metrics that don't get shown in your range or your stats. They greatly impact your damage output on bosses, which is where maximizing your damage is the most important. Note here that critical damage is not shown in this grid because it is a more equals better stat. The more you can get, the better it is, since it does not go at the expense of other damage sources. The other numbers, however, have a more nuanced balance to it, as highlighted in my WSE optimization video. It's not just a case of more equals better for those stats. Then Legion level, Star Force, weapon, and item flame scores, node levels, and arcane power. These stats will indicate which aspects of progression you're currently under or over-investing in. If you find yourself way ahead or way behind in a category, you might find it beneficial to shift the amount of time and effort you're spending in these aspects, and that could benefit you greatly for your overall progression through the game. Note here that if there was recently a Star Force event or a functioning TMT event, that it is very normal at that point to be slightly imbalanced in favor of the event you just had. That does not necessarily mean that it was a bad decision. It just means that the next thing you're going to be spending effort on is going to be one of the other parts of upgrading. So if you fall within all of these metrics, what content does that mean you can participate in? So you already saw a teaser on the bottom of the progression grid, but with the progression in mind, your level now becomes a great indicator. This is because Reboot has a specific level penalty based on the level difference with the monsters you're hitting, and that's why I use that as the main indicator. So as you can see here, the bonus final damage goes up to plus 10%. This is why people will say you need to be level 255 to deal max damage to Will, for example, as Will is level 250 boss. Even being level 245, which is just 5 levels below Will, will already give you a 25% final damage debuff. This is also the reason for people who are wondering why the leveling guide for Reboot typically goes between a lot of different maps, because you don't want to overstay in a map because of the experience penalty, and you don't want to go too soon to a map because of this damage penalty. Even just being 10 levels below a monster and going there a little bit early gives you a 50% damage decrease, which early on means you kill way slower, which means that all of the bonus experience you could get from killing higher level monsters is immediately lost. Attacking Will as soon as you have access to the boss at 15 levels below would give you a damage penalty of 87.5, which basically means you do 1/8 of your damage. Just like arcane power and boost nodes and damage blocked by bosses PDR, their physical damage reduction, this level penalty is a final damage multiplier, which are the most powerful and most important ways of increasing and decreasing your damage. With all of that in mind, this is my advice on what level you want to be at the given level of funding to be able to have a fighting chance on this content. Now, some classes might be able to do things sooner and some a little bit later, and your personal experience and your level of funding with all bosses will of course affect this later on. But at that point, you're probably not looking at this grid anymore. You already have too much game knowledge at that point. This is the !dailies command in my Twitch chat, and it will also be updated as necessary. A lot of content in the first column also has a direct link to the wiki page. This helps you see the boss's PDR percentage, their exact level, as well as determine which dailies might be worth rerolling in things like Dark World Tree and Scrapyard weekly quests. Some of those take a lot of time and might be worth rerolling. First tab of the dailies command also goes into the value of the content, where it talks about the boss crystal value, the experience and the drop rate for flames, the tier for the soul shards, equips or items that are important for game progression that drop from these bosses or are available from this content, and the extent to which the experience of fighting these bosses is in any way relevant to progressing through the game. Some bosses have very old, unupdated, just silly boss mechanics, where it's more a matter of just getting more damage and bursting them down, whereas other bosses I think are very important stepping stones, and learning the mechanics of these bosses will give you a very solid foundation to be able to progress in the game and tackle harder boss fights later on in the game. All of this information will be updated as patches happen to make sure that it stays up to date and is a good indicator of content and upgrade level. I hope this helps you all to figure out what to upgrade next and how to prioritize your dailies and weeklies. For more in-depth information, check out my video on IED, WSC optimization, transfer hammer and transposing, and the flame score explanation. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope this helps you guys. Have fun, and see you later.